Welcome back to the show. I'm Chad, and today we are talking to Rob Edwards, who is the author of Defiant, the story of Robert Smalls, which is from Stranger Comics and Legion In. So um, I'll I'll let bring Rob in and let him introduce himself and tell us about the book.
Hey, how you doing, Chad? Yes.
How's it going?
Great, great, great. Yeah, I'm
Thanks for
Rob.
taking
Go ahead.
thanks for taking thanks for taking the time to chat with us today about the book. I mean, I read it and it was a very informative, book, and it was very moving too. So, but before we get talking about the book, tell us a little bit about yourself, as what you do as your career, or and as your history with comics.
Oh, great. Well, I guess the biggest thing in our wonderful comic book world is I wrote the movie Captain America: Brave New World, and I have two animated films. I wrote King of Kings. I co-wrote King of Kings. That is also in theaters and I believe streaming soon. And I wrote and directed Sneaks, which is also out. Before that, I wrote The Princess and the Frog and Treasure Planet for Disney. I worked on Frozen, Tangled, Wreck-It Ralph. Had a good time there. And then before that, I did sitcoms like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, In Living Color, Rock. I've had a good time. So yeah.
And is
And
this
more
your first venture
as a,
into
as a
comics?
I'm sorry, as a comic book person, when I was growing up, I lived about a block and a half away from a great comic book store in Detroit, and my friends and I, there were five of us, would go and basically mob this store every week. And just kind of go through everything, and put our money together, and then buy a comic book, and then figure out who was going to get to keep it for however many days. So I absolutely love comics.
Do you remember maybe the first comic book that you either read, or maybe the one that made the first impression on you that made you want to continue?
Yep, Spider-Man. It was, I can't remember which issue. Now, of course, I believe I have, well, many, way too many if you ask my wife. But yeah, it was Spider-Man. It was just something about that book met me where I was, like, okay, Grady's an awkward kid kind of dealing with stuff, whatever superpowers and whatever, he could contribute to the world, and all of that. I just really love the way Stan Lee kind of revolutionized the way comic books, were. The DCU was great, but everybody, all those people were kind of like born with powers, except for Batman. And what Stan Lee was able to bring, and Kirby, of course, were able to bring, was this humanity to the process. And that's kind of the thing that I'm trying to do with Defiant, is to show the humanity behind the man. Here was a just heroic person in history who's basically lost, and we want to tell his story in the most dynamic way, and comic books was that way.
So, is this your first comic book that you've worked on, or have you worked on other things?
Yeah, well, I think at when I was working at Disney, we would have little books that we would sell at Comic-Con. And my contribution was kind of script pages with coffee stains and that kind of thing. So I've and that was as close as I got to an actual like comic book. I had a comic strip in high school. I draw. In fact, at Disney, I was, they said, third from the bottom as far as talent goes in the story department. So that was a huge compliment. And then yeah, but this is the first time that I've actually got to sit down and chop it up with artists and really bring a comic book to life.
So, tell us about, give us the bigger picture of what Defiant, the story of Robert Smalls, is about.
Yeah, well, Robert Smalls, Was born a slave, and kind of raised in the backyard of the slave master, one of the richest men in South Carolina, and was essentially, because of that, because his mother had helped raise the family, several generations of the family, in fact, since the time she was a child. He was raised in their house as kind of like a rich white boy. And because of that, he had this mindset that, a non-slave mindset. When he's 23 years old, he's conscripted to work on a Confederate ship that ferried munitions back and forth to the troops. And one night, when the white crew took off to leave the black crew to watch over the munitions that they had on the boat that day, he and the crew members met their families in Charleston Harbor and took off on this boat, the Planter. Robert Smalls was disguised himself as his captain. They got through 5 military checkpoints, surrendered the boat to the Union Army, and which made him and the crew, fairly well off, and they were able to kind of live their new lives as free men. After that, that's where most stories would end. But after that, he started a printing press. He started a railroad. He ran for Congress 5 times and won. And I think one of the most heroic things he did was died of old age, because he had a target on his back the entire time.
So when you were, what I guess inspired you to be a part of this story as the author or writer?
Yes. Well, a high school friend of mine was working at a company called Legion M. And Legion M is a fantastic organization. It's for fans, by fans. It's great. You've been to Comic Con. You've seen these guys. They're amazing. And he came to me with this thing. Apparently, one of their members had sent a meme to the group saying, "Look, we've made all these movies about all these other things. Here's this guy. Here's his accomplishments. Why isn't there a movie about him?" And so when he brought it to me, I was actually surprised. I consider myself a fairly well-read individual, but I had not heard of Robert Smalls before David Baxter told me about him. And so I started doing my research, and I was looking for a really good book about him that we could base a movie on. And I couldn't. There were many really great books, but I couldn't find one that really told the story that I wanted to tell, which was the story of a man trying to make a better life for his family. And so I started to research, and this wonderful woman, Maisha Eatman over at Harvard, who's a history professor there, helped us out. Michael Bulwer Moore, who's great grandson of Robert Smalls, helped us kind of fill in a bunch of the stuff, and we found this really great narrative of how this story unfolded, because immediately I had questions of who would do this and why. And why that moment was so important to him, and what were the repercussions of it. So as we were reading, this wonderful, that's a back art by Ray Anthony Height, who's an amazing artist, and this one is Nicholas Draper Ivey, who does Static Shock. Ray, of course, does Black Panther, and and so coming out of that, we were just like, okay, this story has to be told. It has to be told in a dynamic way, and the best way to do it is to just go out with a graphic novel of some kind, so that we have some IP to base the work on, because we didn't want to, have to explain the story and all of its details every time we were pitching it. And so there we are. The book comes out on Juneteenth of this year, and we're hoping that it's part of the celebration of Juneteenth. That as Juneteenth celebrates the truth getting to the people in Texas, so too is this the truth. Realized for people, families all over America. And so that's where we are now. We're about to announce a director coming on the project. Hopefully later this week we'll have that announcement, and shortly thereafter a piece of talent that's going to play Robert Smalls, and it's off to the races.
Nice. So the story is kind of, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the story begins, Smalls telling the story as he's older. Is that correct? Is that
Yeah.
the correct framing of the story? So,
Yes.
um,
Yes. It's a
how?
grandfather telling the story to his grandson, and the reason for that was basically to show that a lot of slave narratives are very triggering. That there's what I call whip on back, kind of storytelling, and a lot of times like just nobody wants to share those stories. Um, you know, uh, uh, Grandparents and parents want to shield their children from these kinds of narratives. So my idea was, okay, well, if you see that it's a grandfather telling the story to his grandson, it's automatic that it's going to be a safe story to tell. And so at book signings and stuff, we've seen like 5-year-olds kind of timidly walking up and saying, like, I want to read this, and like, okay, yes, you can. It's a book that is meant to be shared with
Mhm.
families.
So, besides Robert, who are some of the other main characters that we meet along the way?
Yes. Well, we meet his mother, who I said was a child when she began working for the McKee family. She was actually the McKees every year would come around for Christmas delivering clothing to to the other slaves that were working for them. And Lydia was the one girl that did not hide from the McKees when they came around, because she was just a very, very nice person, and wound up working for the McKee family. So she is the heart, and the first part of the heart of the story. Henry McKee is history has many interpretations of him. I have my own. I think he was a guy trying to, do the best with a incredibly flawed system. A very problematic, institutionalized system, and so he features in there. There is the crew itself that was there, and one thing in the while researching this. Uh, Michael Bulwer Moore says, you know more about my great grandfather than anybody that I've ever talked to, because I just went down this it's just incredible rabbit hole of information. But one thing that we found was that when they commandeered the planter, on the ship's crew list was different from the list of people that that were taken in by the Union. There was the absence of one name and the presence of a new name. The absence of one, I think, was a person that they thought was going to betray them, and so they worked around him to get him off the boat in time for the rescue. And the name that appears was a fisherman, and I believe that person was the person that ferried the families onto the boat. And when he discovered what was going on, he said, "No, no, no, I'm not going back. I'm joining you guys." And so he was free with the others. As a writer and not a historian, I can speculate. I can make best guesses as to why
Mhm.
these things happen, and that's one of the things that is limited by if you read any of the other books. Some of the other characters, the characters on the ship are real. The Captain Rayleigh is a real person. There were the two other white crew members were both named Sam, and the two people that helped him out, one was an engineer, and the other was a helmsman. And when I found that out, I was like, wait, he's the helmsman, but Robert Smalls was the pilot. So I'm guessing that Robert, in his ascension, took over the job of the previous helmsman, and then they become friends. They show up later in the narrative. So a really fun story, with really wonderful characters.
Now, you said that you did a lot of research, for the story. Was there maybe something that you learned doing that research that you weren't able to incorporate into the story that you found interesting?
Most of the stuff. Well, I'll say that the best answer to that is that there is more more than we could fit into one graphic novel. So there's plans for volume at least two, maybe
Mhm.
two and three. One that takes his we take him through the commandeering of the planter and the surrendering to the Union Army. But right after that, he met Lincoln. He helped convince Lincoln that slaves should be able to fight for the Union Army. And so when you see the movie Glory, that's actually downstream from this story. And
Okay.
His starting of the newspaper. I believe that was because after slavery, so many people were trying to find their families. Families had been sold off during slavery. Basically, girls were sold off to make the fathers more productive. One of those weird things. So people were trying to find their families, and a lot of the white newspapers didn't want their classified sections to overwhelm them. So Robert Smalls started a printing press in order to get that word out. In fact, most of the slaves, or all of the slaves, were illiterate, so they would collect in churches and barnyards and stuff like that, and one person would read the entire newspaper to everybody. Have you seen my husband? He's tall and answers to the name of John. That kind of thing. And the railroad started mainly because they were, freed slaves were not allowed to, use traditional methods to transport goods from one place to another. So he started a railroad to help that. And by railroad, it's basically like horse-drawn carriages and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That transit system is what he created. So there's that. I think one of the fun things, as we're talking about research, one of the fun things I found was just in looking at the lineage of what he had done when he was a kid, when he was 10. He has all these jobs. He's selling tobacco to adults. He's selling candy to kids. He would buy large packages, make smaller packages, and sell those. Kind of like loose cigarettes. Mm-hmm. to make money to buy his freedom. And there's all of these things, and then all of a sudden he becomes a lamplighter. One of the people that lights the street lights. And I was like, why did he become a lamplighter? And then I discovered that there was before that incident, he was arrested for staying out late. That he would do these jobs and then he would stay out late and he would hang out with some of the white kids in town, and he would get arrested because black people weren't supposed to be out late. And I said, I think he became a lamplighter so that he could stay out late, so that he had an excuse to be able to kind of look at the stars. And so I told Michael Bulwer, I said, I think that's it. And he says, oh my God, that's probably it. And I told Maisha, and she said, yeah, it's it. That sounds very plausible. So in the gaps of history, the things that the historians can't tell, you find these really wonderful moments of character. So yeah, I was really happy about that.
Now, as someone who's written for the screen and TV, were there any challenges that you found writing a graphic novel, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, well, the graphic novel, it actually had more to do with like what I did in sitcoms and what I had done at Disney. Where at Disney is a very collaborative process. You write it. For me, my process is I would write a draft. I would give it to the story department. The story department would draw kind of thumbnails and show them to me. And then I would, because it's collaborative, they're coming up with their own ideas as they're storyboarding. They would come back to me. I would take another pass at the screenplay that kind of highlighted the things that they were doing, but added back, some of the storytelling elements that I thought were important. And then we would present the work product of that to the directors, and off we'd go. And this was a lot like that, where Daryl May, who works at Stranger Comics, and Sebastian Jones, and all the magnificent artists there would show me their thumbnails, their basics, and then we would talk about it in terms of like the direction of it. There's angles, what we could do with the lighting, and what fun comic book elements we could add to each page, and we'd go from there. So it was a challenge at first because Daryl and I had to kind of come up with a language to start, but it was a wonderful process once we got going.
And how was it working with Nicholas and Ray Anthony, kind of between making sure that the art and the your story kind of flowed well together.
Yeah, well, Sean Damian Hill did most of the interiors,
Mm-hmm.
and also Black Panther, and Sean is fantastic. He had a lot of his own ideas that he would bring there. So Daryl would pass it on to Sean, and Sean would kind of have his pencils, and then we'd go from there. Now. Some of it is just, like I think in the creative process, any kind of collaborative process, there's a bit of a phone, what do you call it, telephone, where
Mm-hmm.
I will have an idea in my head as I'm writing it. It goes to Daryl, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's, he plussed it. That was kind of fun, and then Sean Damian Hill would have his own take on it. And sometimes at the end, you just have to kind of divorce yourself from the idea that Rob, you can't draw everything. It's going to be collaborative. These guys are going to bring these things in, and I just really enjoyed the you lean into the surprises and some of the fun of it.
Having written this and done the worked on Captain America, are there any characters in either universe that you feel drawn towards or would like to kind of have a chance to put your stamp on?
Yeah. Well, I find one thing that I'm always trying to do, whether it's King of Kings or Princess of the Frog or, Captain America or Defiant, is to find the dignity in the character, that both, that in Captain America, it's there's a guy who is trying to do right by everybody. He's trying to do the right thing, and he knows that he cannot make a mistake, and that is his superpower. In fact, he doesn't have the super serum, but he does have this incredible heart that drives him. And I think that's paralleled in Robert Smalls, is that he's a guy trying to make the world a better place for his family. He's willing to risk his own death in order to do it. He realizes the price, that not only the price of freedom, but also the benefits and gifts of freedom. Same as Tiana is not willing to kind of let the constraints of poverty, in the 20s, keep her down. She, she's almost there. She has this dream that she's collecting penny by penny to make it happen. I really love characters who do that, who kind of strive. Almost like the Shawshank Redemption of it all. You do not have to be confined by your surroundings. You can you can dream and realize a better life.
So, do you have a favorite part of the story, or one that really speaks to you, or spoke to you, and while you were working on it?
I think there's well, I'll spoil it for everybody. he survives the encounter. Isn't it? That's the surprise. Gets through the night and lives a long life. And there was this moment where we're trying to find, like, I wonder what it was that he's pinned between the Confederacy. He still has running the Confederate flag. The Confederates now know what he's up to, and the Union sees this ship cruising towards them with the Confederate flag, laden with munitions, and what do they do? In trying to kind of figure that out as a movie moment, like that there's very little actually spoken about how he survived this encounter, because it's tremendous. And what we did was we went back to him. There was this wonderful anecdote about him and Henry McKee, learning how to sail, and learning the water and how the water works. And as a sailor myself, just there are here's a boat that does not have a hull to it, there has to be a little bit of magic in how he got through that moment. And so that's the moment that I think is really, really, truly wonderful, because I think it's like, fate conspires to save this man.
And what do you hope that people who read this take away from it?
Well, I think that what I'm hoping, I have two sons, and as I'm always, telling them stories like this, and like I say, this is attempt to revise the like I say, whip on back kind of story, slave narrative. What I love about this story is its inspirational qualities. And, for my sons and for everybody, I think that the notion that here's a man who was born a slave, who had everything against him all the way through, but kept his mindset and was able to, go through all kinds of craziness that night. The whole thing started at like 3 a.m. and he surrendered the ship at 6 as the sun was rising. So if he could go through all of that, then maybe a B- in science isn't the worst thing in the world. Maybe you can recover from it and live to fight another day. And so that's what I'm hoping people are inspired by, is that, I always use this phrase, WWRSD, what would Robert Smalls do? And and so there are those times when it's like, oh, my computer crashes and whatever. And I, I'm late to see Chad. So, and you go like, okay, what would Robert Smalls do? Like, he would persevere. He would find a way to do it. So, yeah.
So why don't you give one last pitch for the book, and then where people can find you and your work, if you're on social media or anything like that.
Oh, great. Well, the book is available wherever books are sold. It's on Amazon. There are two forms. There's a hardcover, this wonderful hardcover. There's also a soft cover, and you can also buy it at strangercomics.com, and you can buy it at legionm.com. There's a website special for it, defiantproject.com, where you can grab it. I think, because Juneteenth comes right after Father's Day. It's a perfect Father's Day gift, and it's a perfect Juneteenth gift. So go for it. Social media wise, you can find me at I am Rob Edwards on Instagram and all platforms, actually. You can find Defiant at Defiant Project, and Legion M, Stranger Comics, and I believe that is it. Please reach out, because I love going back and forth with people about all the projects. So welcome.
Well, I know you have a hard out here in a few minutes, so I'd love to have you back for Volume 2.
Yes,
we can talk about how this one did, and about the next volume.
So. Exactly. Well, you can talk about my next meeting, which is about Brown Sugar Fairies, which also comes out of Stranger Comics. I'm trying to do write and direct that as a film. So yeah, we're having a good time. It's a good fun time at the Edwards household. So,
all right. Well,
this has been an incredible pleasure. I'm sorry we had to go short. I would have loved to go on another half hour. I'm sure we had all kinds of wonderful things to talk about. And I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, it's just an excuse to have you back and
there you
learn more about you and your projects and everything. So thank you for taking the time. Like you said, the book Defiant comes out on June 19th, and everybody should order it, pick it up, and read it.
It's so beautiful.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your day.
You too.